Hello everyone and welcome back to JDD TV. I'm your host Josh and we are back for the match preview of the upcoming friendly between the Canadian men's national team and Japan. I'm going to have a guest coming on to help break down the Japanese side. I'm going to give you my take as well on the starting 11s, and it should be a pretty interesting preview, so hopefully you guys are excited, and if you are, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and let's get into the episode now. The Canadian men's national team have their final preparation match against Japan before the World Cup begins. This is a very intriguing match. Japan's very talented. And before we get into our conversation with Dan Orlowitz, we are going to first take a look at the Canadian men's national team and how I believe that they're going to line up. Japan usually plays in that 4-2-3-1 system, and I'm expecting Canada to potentially give them a lot of the ball so they can kind of sit in the way that they're going to play in the World Cup, which is probably dropping back a little bit and looking to hit on the counters. For that reason, I'm going to think that John Herdman is going to go with the 4-4-2 system. In my mind, I'm thinking about that three-man midfield that I think could be very useful against a Belgium and a Croatia, but I'm thinking a little bit that maybe a two-man midfield didn't get away for Belgium, but regardless, I do think they might do that for this. So for the match, I got them lined up in the 4-4-2 system. In goal is Milan Borjan. At right back is Alistair Johnston. The two center backs is Vittoria and Miller. Left back is Adekubi. Right mid is Buchanan. Left mid is Davies. The two central mids is going to be Stefan Eustachio and Samuel Piet. Just because I don't know how Hutch is doing. If Hutch is fully fit, I'm expecting him to go in there. But if not, I think Samuel Piet might be given the opportunity. And then up front will be Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. And it's not that hard to switch it up if you do decide to go in a back three. You can just kind of shift Tajon to the wing back and then add a midfielder basically in there for Larin. You take Larin off, put in Osorio, and it's a very similar type of formation, or Ismail Kone. But without further ado, that's how I think Canada's going to line up. But let's take a look at the opposition view. So let's take a look with our conversation with Dan. All right, everyone. So for today's Canada versus Japan preview, we've brought on Dan Orlowitz. He is a bit of a Japanese expert, and I'll get him to get into that very soon. But Dan, I really appreciate giving the time today, and maybe just give a very Cliff Notes version of your background with the Japanese national team.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be on a show of my adopted country in a way. My wife is Canadian, so I have that connection.
Nice.
I've been following Japanese soccer for about 15 years now. I've been writing about it for a little over a decade. I currently work for the Japan Times. I cover the domestic league, national team, players in Europe, women's leagues, and national team grassroots. So I try to wear a lot of hats and cover as much as I can.
That's awesome. I mean, the perfect man to have on here today. And we have it's a friendly match coming up, but the two groups are, interestingly enough, right beside each other. So, if Canada sneaks out of the group and so does Japan, there could be an opportunity we do actually end up meeting each other in the knockouts. But let's just get right into the Japan side of things. Just quickly tell us about Japan's preparation for the World Cup and how things are going so far.
Well, we've got our squad. I think most of the players have entered Qatar by now as we're recording this. A couple players haven't quite gotten in there. It's a very inexperienced squad in terms of the World Cup. Obviously, this will be Japan's 7th straight World Cup tournament. The first was in 1998, and they've just steadily been going in since then. 3 round of 16 appearances, pretty solid performances. In 2018 came within 30 minutes of knocking out Belgium and getting into the round and into the quarterfinals, I should say. This squad has a lot of potential, especially up in attacking midfield. There's just a lot of great talent. You have Daichi Kamara, who's doing great things at Frankfurt. You have Kaoru Mitoma, who's been getting more appearances for Brighton and scoring goals and impressing. Junya Ito, who's doing well in France. Of course, a lot of fans will know of Takumi Minamino, who played for Liverpool until last season. Takefusa Kubo, who was signed by Real Madrid when he turned 18, and now he's at Real Sociedad after he sort of fell out of the Real Madrid organization. So the midfield is stacked, and there's even a couple names that I haven't mentioned on that list. You have a defense that is mostly backed by veterans: Yuto Nagatomo, Maya Yoshida, Hiroki Sakai. They've all played at multiple World Cups. Takehiro Tomiyasu, who's of course a defender at Arsenal, and he's sort of the newcomer in terms of defensive starters. And we have some questions. We have up front, we don't quite know who's going to be starting, and I think this Canada friendly is going to be an audition for probably Ayase Ueda and Daisen Maeda, and then goalkeeper you probably have Daniel Schmidt starting. I can't imagine that Shuichi Gonda will be the starter, but we'll see. It's a very going to be a very interesting friendly in a lot of ways because a lot of our players are dealing with injuries, and so we don't quite know how we're going to line up or which players will be available. But ahead of the first game against Germany, it's going to be really important to see how they're doing and what their fitness is.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, as well as like Canada's played the U.S. men's national team a few times in World Cup qualifyings, and we had some pretty positive results against them. And then there's a recent friendly that you guys played against the U.S. men's national team, and a lot of the Canadian audience will be obviously familiar with how Canada played against the U.S. But I watched that game, Japan versus U.S., and I thought Japan looked very, very good. I don't know if you want to just give the viewers maybe a little insight of your thoughts on that game, and I guess why do you think Japan was maybe so dominant? Because they look really, really good, and it was a little bit surprising because the U.S. men's national team got an exciting young team as well, and it was just it blew my mind away just to see how good that Japanese side truly is.
Well, I think that for the U.S., as far as the U.S. is concerned, not having Christian Pulisic there hurt them in the midfield, and it really did allow Japan to press aggressively, and rarely did the U.S. get out of their own half in that game. I do think that that game flattered Japan in terms of the quality of the press and how much they were able to do on the attack. But you look at how they played and the number of chances that they were setting up, they should have been able to score 2 or 3 more goals. It was a 2-0 game, but it really should have been 3-4-0. And you saw a great Daiji Kamada goal, and then Kaoru, I believe it was Kaoru Mitoma with the second fairly late. Once the result, it was already more or less decided, but it did that. That is sort of the issue that this Japan side has, that anyone can score a goal, but you can't point to someone and say he will score a goal. You don't have a Messi, a Ronaldo, a Neymar. You don't have someone who can really carry the team on his back. And this gets back to the question of inexperience, because there's only 6 players in the squad who have been to a World Cup before. So there is a question of how these players will do on that stage. But to go back and answer your question more directly, yes, the U.S. result, I think, gave us a lot of confidence that this Japan system under Moriyasu can work, and this is how it looks when it works really well. And I wasn't expecting Japan to give the U.S. a sort of identity crisis heading into the World Cup, but it's a very strange World Cup and it's a very strange year. So,
yeah. I mean, it was because I have like the CONCACAF realm. It's always fun to watch when the U.S. national team kind of panic a little bit, because you see a lot of like accounts, and they were really disturbed with that performance by the U.S. national team. But I was looking at the other side, and I was just really impressed by the Japan friendly, which gets me really excited for Canada and Japan. It's the last one. You guys have a CONCACAF nation in your group. It's not that overly matters, but it's kind of nice to line up some exhibition matches and against CONCACAF nations. But Canada's been as a tricky one, and I kind of mentioned this to you just beforehand, because I know you haven't watched a lot of the Canadian national team, but they have certain matches where when they want to have the ball, they will take it. I mean, Uruguay is a nation that likes to sit back. Canada had, I think, close to 60% of the ball. They had that against Qatar. But both matches against the U.S. national team, where they picked up 4 to 6 points in qualifying, they had under 30%. It's wild the way that they have. So I'm curious to see, how do you think Japan's going to approach the game? Do you think they're going to be the team to try to take possession to Canada, or do you think they're going to be happy to maybe sit back and allow Canada to have a little bit more of the ball?
I think insofar as this is sort of a simulation of the CONCACAF parallel there, insofar as this is simulation of how Japan can sort of expect to play against Costa Rica, for example, because I don't see Canada as an analog for Germany or Spain.
Yeah.
No offense.
No,
but,
that's
going to be a totally different kind of game. And so I do expect Japan to be a bit more aggressive. And when they want to be, and when they do press, they will press the hell out of you. So I can see it being the sort of game where Japan has 60-70% possession, but depending again on who's going to be playing, there are a lot of vulnerabilities there in terms of the counter. The left, or the fullbacks, I should say, will probably be Yuto Nagatomo on the left and Hiroki Sakai on the right, and they're they're fairly senior players. They're both in their 30s. They've been here a couple times. Nagatomo is as an FC Tokyo fan who got into the sport through them and into the J League through them. He is one of my favorite players, but he does tend to play up to the level of opposition. And if Canada aren't bringing the same intensity that, say, Brazil delivered when they played they played friendly here in June, will he amp things up and will he really play up a notch? I don't know. The problem at left back is that Yuta Nakayama, who is at Huddersfield, did his ACL and he's missing the tournament, and he was a really big loss for Japan in terms of defensive depth. They could try playing Tomiyasu on the left because of that's the position he's used to playing at Arsenal, and he's dealing with a hamstring thing, I believe, and he's recovering and he's in training. But the defense is such a weird thing where we have a bunch of puzzle pieces and we don't know how they're going to fit. But this is going to be a really important game to help figure that out, hopefully, because your first game is Germany. You don't really have two chances to get that right.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the example you used there because, I mean, one thing Canada will obviously try to utilize is their pace. They have Davies, they have Buchanan, they have a ton of pacey wingers and fullbacks. So I think when Canada's prepping for this World Cup, they've got a tough group. Morocco and Croatia and Belgium. More than likely, I could see them all having more of the ball. So Japan's a quality side as well. I'm curious to see what Herman's going to do. If he's like, all right, well, this is the preparation. Let's give Japan the ball. Let's sit back. Let's attack. And then same with you guys. You probably set up the Canada match to try to emulate the Costa Rica match. And I'm telling you right now, Costa Rica will definitely sit back. They did it against us. They've done it. That's the way that they play. So that's what's making me think that it could be like a 65-35 type possession game, which could be entertaining because that's what maybe both nations need to do. This is a friendly for a reason. But I guess after that, just to kind of wrap up things here, I don't know if you're able to put together a starting 11. I know it's a tricky one because you said you didn't know what the potential players who are going to be available. But if you don't want to, you don't think you're able to because you don't know, maybe just give one or two players that you think could be game breakers for. Or you think you can? Or I don't know. It's up to you.
I could give you sort of the ideal if players are healthy and
Sure.
Based on that, I think it'll be Schmidt in goal. Maybe he'll swap with Gonda at halftime. I don't know. I mean, Eiji Kawashima is a bajillion years old. He's not going to get any playing. God help us all if Eiji Kawashima is getting minutes. So I think Schmidt in goal. You're starting from the right. I think it'll be Sakai, Yoshida, Tomiyasu, Nagatomo. I mean, they might play around with that. I don't know. I know Koi Takara is back playing. I don't know if he's healthy enough to start. He might get some sort of sub minutes. Your midfield is, I think it's going to be Hidemasa Morita, and as for who he will pair up with, Wataru Endo had that concussion in the Bundesliga last week, and looks like he'll recover from that. But the question is, to what will he be ready for Thursday, or will they hold him for next week? So if not Endo, then it could be Ao Tanaka, who's also dealing with a knee thing, or it could be Gaku Shibasaki, who is the last man standing at central midfield, which is kind of scary, if we're being honest. Then your attacking midfielders, Junya Ito on the right flank, Daichi Kamada at central attacking midfield, and probably Takefusa Kubo on the left. And then up front, as I said earlier, I think either Daisen Maeda or Ayase Ueda will start, and they'll switch places at halftime, because I think that Daisen Maeda sort of has the inside track to start against Germany, but they're both in good form relatively for their clubs. So I think that Moyasu is going to want to see 45 minutes from each of them.
And I mean, looking at that team, so I'm assuming it's the 4-2-3-1 system. That's their kind of their go-to.
They'll do 4-2-3-1. Sometimes they'll do 4-3-3, but like it's mostly, we're all generally assuming 4-2-3-1.
because Kamada will slide into that center attacking mid position, and he's a player for me personally I want to look out for, because I just think he's been class this season. I believe he's being linked to even a bigger move like a Borussia Dortmund. I think is interesting. So
Yep.
I mean, he's been fantastic, and for me, like as a Canadian, he's probably the player I'm the most worried about. But yeah, I mean 4-2-3-1. Canada will probably line up in a bit of a similar system, but that's well, not similar system. 4-4-2, 3-4-3 kind of switches around there. They're gonna probably try to utilize, like I mentioned, the flanks. But awesome, Dan. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. Really let a lot of the Canadian viewers and anyone else who's watching this preview give a little insight on how Japan's potentially going to set up. But yeah, if anyone out there who wants to check out Japanese football, I guess in its entirety, I will put Dan's Twitter. And if there's anything else, Dan, that is the best way to kind of find you, or otherwise your Twitter will be in the description.
Yeah, no, there. All my articles in my Twitter profile. There's a link to all my stuff at the Japan Times. Go check that out. I'm playing with the idea of a Substack. I haven't quite figured out what to do, but do that. And good luck to you guys at the World Cup. That's the American in me speaking. I think CONCACAF Unite at this time of year. Gonna be an interesting one. Gonna be a weird World Cup, but I think that there's it's very weird covering the Japan at this World Cup, because we don't know. I mean, you guys are here for the first time in a long time. Yeah. And I think it's a huge accomplishment for Canada to have made this World Cup. And we're sort of waiting to see, well, when do we get to the quarterfinals? What does it take to get us to the quarterfinals? And I think that, like, especially playing two recent former world champions is a huge test for us. So yeah.
I mean, both of our groups are, I'd say, pretty strong. But hopefully, we can both somehow maybe figure out a way to get to the round of 16. But yeah, I mean, it's a scary group with Japan. I mean, Japan's like a quality side, like I mentioned, but I mean, with Germany and Spain in there as well, it's in for a tough one. But we'll have to see how it goes. But Dan, we really appreciate you coming on. We'll hopefully talk to you soon.
No problem. Absolutely.
A big thank you to Dan for coming on the channel. His insight on the Japanese national team was very, very useful. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this preview, and if you did, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll hopefully see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.